Hey, this is Matt from Custom Car Grills with a mesh install for the 2013 through 16 Subaru BRZ. For this install, the bumper needs to be removed from the vehicle like what we have here. I'm going to use a couple different tapes to help make a cut line on the bumper, and the first one that I'm going to grab is a 1/2 inch wide. Starting from right under the crash bar area, I'll run this tape along the bumper's edge. This needs to contour to the bumper's shape, and depending on the tape used, multiple pieces might need to be broken off as shown here. When done correctly, there should be a symmetrical tape line that will later give us a good fixed depth that we can use to cut the bumper to. Before I get to that step though, I am going to make a cut to get the bulk of the stock grill out of the bumper. To do the cutting, I'll grab my rotary tool and equip it with Dremel's number 543 cutting and shaping wheel. The cuts along the top should be far enough away from the edge that there's no chance of cutting the painted surface. If the installer is not familiar with using a rotary tool in a spot like this, then some protective tape should be used to mask off the surrounding area. As I make the turn around the corner, I need to change my angle of approach a little bit. The rotary tool needs to be flipped around, and it's very important to make sure that the chuck that holds the cutting wheel in place doesn't touch the bumper. Then, there's going to be a small portion of where the upper and lower parts of the bumper meet, and that can't be easily cut from the front. This should complete the major cut of the center section, and the center can be removed like so. Next, I want to make a cut along the line here in green, and it's important not to cut in too deep here. This will give us a good rough cut that will start to blend the top and bottom sections better, but it's going to need more refinement soon. The cutting wheel should make short work of this cut, but it's important to make sure it's a good, even, steady cut. If it's wavy, we can fix it later, but it's best to keep the cuts nice and smooth to begin with. To get the final contour of the upper edge, I'll grab some tape and make a line that creates an even and symmetrical area to cut along. This is a step that the installer should spend some extra time on to make sure that the contour is a good fit and look for the bumper. The top of the shaping wheel is highly abrasive and works great for slowly shaving down the bumper like this. I'm just making a bunch of short and light passes until I've worked the bumper up to the tape line. This is why a proper tape line is important. This is where the final contour will be. A steady hand and some patience will go a long way in making this look good. Like with the previous cutting steps, a few different angles of approach may be needed to get the correct angle. I want the cutting edge to be facing the engine compartment so that it can't be easily seen and to give the mesh a nice flush edge to rest against. After the cuts are finished, I'll remove the line and throw away the tape. More than likely, there will be some burnt-on plastic bits that can be picked off by hand. This will make the edge that was just cut look a little bit cleaner, and if any additional cutting is needed, then it should hopefully be obvious at this point. Any remaining burnt plastic bits that couldn't be removed by hand can likely be scraped off with a razor. If the blade doesn't outright remove the bits, then it should at least loosen them to the point where it can go back and pick them off by hand. Now, I'm going to repeat some of the previous steps on the lower half of the bumper. I've got a good steady hand and I'm shaving the bumper precisely up to the tape line that was laid out before. Please note that I'm cutting the lower edge with the cutting wheel from behind the bumper. This will give us a better cut, and the chuck that holds the bit in place won't have a chance of glancing the bumper. Once I'm happy with the cut, then I'll remove this tape line and start working on cleaning up the edge a little bit. Again, I'm just removing some of the larger burnt-on bits. By now, I'm sure it's obvious that I've got a little bit of a mismatch on the bumper edge depth between the top of the bumper and the bottom. To blend the two together, I'll get some 1/4 inch wide tape that's fairly flexible and start drawing out a new tape line that will blend the two parts together. This may take some practice or a few tries to get right, but essentially I'm trying to fade the thinner upper half into the wider lower half. After I've got a good line laid out, then I'll get my rotary tool out again and make the final cuts to the bumper. And again, a good steady hand and some patience are essential. Then, once the cut is made, I'll remove the tape and refine down the rough edge a little bit. Using some 180 grit or finer paper and a sanding block can be a good combo for smoothing out the cut edge and removing any remaining burnt bits. Of course, if you have access to a small dual-action sander like this one, then the job can be done much quicker and possibly with better results. We're now ready for the install of the mesh, and speaking of which, here's the mesh piece that we have for sale on our website. This is pre-cut and pre-formed specifically for the Subaru BRZ. Now, while this does have the right cut and bent edge, we otherwise ship this flat, and there is a subtle curve that needs to be made on the sides. With it laying face down, the mesh can carefully be pulled up a little bit, like this, to give a curve that will match the curve of the bumper. It's important to note, though, that the bent tabs of the mesh face the front of the bumper. They do not face back towards the engine bay. Next, I'll drop the mesh on the back of the bumper to do a test fit. If everything looks good, then I'll take the mesh piece back off and then scuff up the back of the bumper with some sandpaper. This will give our adhesive a little something more to grip to and give a more solid installation. Then, let's put the mesh piece back in place. Again, the bent tabs face towards the front of the bumper, and they are wrapping around the thin edge of the bumper that we still have. Now it's time to grab some cable ties, some foam, and a handful of wood dowels, or something like a wood dowel. To start the mesh install, I'll take a couple ties and loop them sideways through a couple spots in the center of the mesh like this. And then feed a dowel through the tie loops. With some overlap of the dowel on the bumper, and with the foam between the dowel and the bumper, then move the mesh into place and tighten the ties enough to support the mesh into position. The dowel needs to be a few inches taller than the height of the bumper opening to work correctly. Repeat this step a few more times in more areas of the mesh until the mesh is flush up against the back of the bumper all the way around. When it comes time to do the far left and right sides, I needed an additional dowel to give me additional attachment points so that I could get the mesh in here tightly. Before I did any of the modding shown in this video, I actually measured out the height of where the bottom of the top edge came up to, and I cut a wood dowel to that size. The dowel seems to measure up correctly, which is a really good sign. Also, if the bumper appears to be deflecting in a different angle than it did before, there are ways to manipulate the bumper, such as a wood dowel wedged in behind the emblem. Once everything is set, I'll grab the adhesive I want to use for this project, which is Valvoline's Plyo-Grip Plastic Repair number 3. A cheaper and easier to find alternative to Plyo-Grip is Automotive Goop. This stuff works great, but it does take a long time to cure. I've used it on many other installs, and I'll link one of them here if you want to check it out. With the Plyo-Grip style install, I'm applying a thick bead of epoxy around the perimeter of the grill and making sure that I'm getting good contact with both the mesh and with the bumper. This stuff cures quickly, so I need to work fairly fast, but also accurately. Once I have a good amount dispensed, then I'll grab a small brush and spread the epoxy around evenly to try and get a better distribution of Plyo-Grip on both the mesh and bumper. Now it's just a matter of repeating these steps on the rest of the bumper. I want to get the whole perimeter covered so that we can ensure a solid installation. The Plyo-Grip cures in about 30 minutes, whereas the goop adhesive is a full day, so plan your install accordingly depending on which bonding agent you're using. Once the adhesive of choice is cured, then it's time to remove the wood dowel support rods. Just simply cut the ties off with some wire cutters in the reverse order of how they were tied on, and then throw away the ties and foam. The mod is complete. Let's flip it around and see how it turned out. Wow, this looks really good. This open design with the mesh completely transforms the look of the front end. Overall, the mod really isn't too difficult, and I think it would make a good weekend project for BRZ owners. Here's a rendering of how the install should look with the bumper back on the car. Well, that's all I've got for this video. I hope you liked it, and if you have any questions about it, then feel free to contact me. And thanks for watching.